Hi everyone, welcome to Learn Python. In the previous tutorials, we have talked about writing simple functions. We have also talked about positional and keyword argument, print and return statement. So this tutorial is in continuation to those tutorials. Here we would be talking about the powerful Lambda function in Python. What are these, why these are important, and how to use Lambda functions, right? So let's start our discussion on Lambda function. I have here written few note points for you to refer later. Now, lambda functions are basically anonymous functions, means the functions with no name. When we define a function, we have seen earlier that we give a name to the function. Whatever function we define, we give some name to the function. Here we write the arguments, whatever number of arguments the function should take, or we can use star args or double star coargs if we are not sure about the number of inputs. We write colon, and here we write some statement or some expression which we want to execute. So it can be some calculation, and finally it can return something or print something. If you are not using return statement at all, then Python function will return none, because in Python every function has to return something. If you are not using return statement, it has to return none, right? So this we have talked about in function tutorial. Now how lambda function is different from these is, first, we don't necessarily need to give a name to the lambda function, means we can have a function without a name that can be usable, right? Second thing, lambda functions are usable only when we have a single expression. If for this function I am doing multiple things here, I have multiple statements here, and finally I am using something, I am returning something, then I cannot convert it to a lambda function. But if my function is having a single expression, I can use a lambda function for that. We will see how to write lambda function, there it would become more clear. So to define a lambda function, we use lambda keyword. So the keyword is here, it is suggesting me, it depends upon which IDE or code editor you are using. You might be seeing these kind of suggestions, and I would suggest you to take help of these suggestions. Initially it will help you in reducing typo error, but don't copy paste anyone's code. You just type yourself, you type and you will learn, and you see where you do mistakes. And many times we do mistakes which are difficult for find. Even beginners takes hours to find out typographical mistakes or colon or comma or semicolon, they have missed something, so they take a lot of time to find out those mistakes. But this is the process where you will learn and where you will improve your coding. If you will just copy paste someone else's code, you will never learn about these silly mistakes which you will do in the beginning, right? So as of now I am talking about the keyword. Keyword here is lambda. So lambda is a keyword, and here I need to write the argument it takes. So I don't need to write the name of the function, right? I can simply write whatever argument it takes. So for example, it takes A or B or whatever number of arguments it takes, and definitely I need to give here colon. After colon, I need to write here the expression. It should be a single expression. So whatever expression I am doing here, it will return that expression, right? So we will see some examples. For example, here I am just writing A plus B. So this function is equivalent to this function where I am returning A plus B. So these two functions are same. This function has a name. I have given it a name. Maybe I can write add numbers or something like that, and here I have not given any name, but these two functions will do the same job. They will take two numbers, they will add these two numbers, right? So let me just comment this. I was just showing you how to write a function and how to convert it to lambda function. Now if I call this function, for example, how to call this function, because this function don't have a name. So first of all, you need to understand that lambda functions are useful when we want to use a function for a shorter period of time, we want to use it inside a bigger function, or when we are writing a class. In those situations we write and use lambda functions. But still we are in learning phase, so if we want to see how this function works and how we can use this function, then we need to assign it to some object. Basically we can create a variable, and inside that we put this lambda function just for illustration purpose. But you will see later on that you will be using lambda functions by clubbing it with map, reduce, filter, or maybe writing inside functions or classes. There you don't need to give it a particular name. But here, because I want to call this function, I want to give it some name. So suppose I am calling it add func, and this is my add func, right? And I am not writing here the parameters in this name, because it is just a variable which is assigned by this lambda function, and lambda function is adding two numbers, right? Now if I want to call this, how can I call? Can you think of that? If I just call add func, it is suggesting me whatever object is there, it is suggesting me. If I run this code, I will not be able to add two numbers. I will see a lambda object. Let me show you how. So it says that it is a function and you say it is a lambda function, right? So it is showing us that it is a lambda function. It is showing us the class of this function. We know that it is a lambda function, but how to use this lambda function? It is very simple to use. Of course, when we want to add two numbers, we need to supply two numbers. We need to supply the arguments, right? So here we need to write the arguments. For example, I am doing 12 plus 12. It will add these two numbers and it will give us the sum, because now it knows that a equal to 12, b equal to 12. And similarly, I can do 12 plus 34, it will add these two numbers and it will give us the sum. So to be able to use this function, we need to assign it to some object, we need to call that object with the parameters. Also, we can give default values to the arguments, as we have seen in the function definition, that if we want to give default value to one of the arguments, suppose I want to specify b equal to 5. If I am supplying two arguments, it will add the argument supplied by us. But if I am supplying just one argument, for example, I am just asking add function and 12. So it will take a equal to 12, and for b it will take the default value which is here, right? And it will give me the sum 12 plus 5, which is 17, as expected. So it works very similar to the functions which we have seen before. Only difference is we can write it in one line. Second difference is it's an anonymous function. So when we are writing a bigger code, we can directly write the lambda code which execute a single expression instead of creating a separate function and then calling it. So we will see more example, it will become more clear. Now it is another function. We have seen the say hi function which prints hello, how are you? So if we want to create a lambda function, I can just create hi, how are you, like this, and I can assign it into say hi. And similarly, if I print this say hi, it will just show me that it is a function which is of lambda class. And if I print say hi but with the parenthesis, it means I am calling this function now. So it will call the function and the function returns this thing. So I am able to see this. Notice that in lambda function we usually return something because we want to use it inside some other function, some high level function where we need something to be returned by this function. So by default it returns, right? We can use print statement here, but it is not useful in context of lambda function. Now another function we are seeing here is, let me show you. Suppose you want to multiply two numbers, so how you can do it in lambda function? So simply lambda, this is the keyword, and just if you want to multiply two numbers, so you will take the arguments a comma b colon and you will just return a multiplied b. That's it. That is your lambda function for multiplication of two numbers. If you want to do a raised power n, so simply you can do a star star n. It will do a raised power n. It takes less time to write this code. This is the power n function. If we are defining the normal function, we need to write these kind of statement here. Here we can use return or print. Usually we should return, but if we want to see the output directly, we can use print also. In lambda function, we can write it like this. And I have given it a name power n. So I can call it with any number combination and it will work, right? Now we will see one more example so that it becomes how easy is it to use lambda function if we have a bigger function. For example, I am just writing a function which checks whether the number is an even number or not. So I am giving a name even num, and this function is taking just one argument, right? And I want to check if the number is even number. I hope you know this much math. A number which is divisible by 2 is an even number. So the condition is the number should be divisible by 2, and divisible by 2 means when we divide this number by 2, the remainder should be 0. This operator, percent operator in Python, gives us remainder. So this remainder should be exactly equal to 0. So equal to 0 means we have double equal operator here. When we want to check whether one expression is equal to another expression, we use this operator, equal to operator, and 0. So this is the condition which we want to check, and if this is true, we want to return true, that yes, the number is an even number. We can also use print statement if we want to, but I am just using return because I just want true and false. Now else, so otherwise when the number is not divisible by 2, the number is odd number, so we want this function to return false for us. So this is return false. Now this is the function which checks whether a number is an even number or not, right? And if I want to call this number for any number, for example 12, it should return as true. Invalid syntax, I think I have done a typo here. Yeah, when I talk I do a lot of typo. Anyways, and we get to know because when I write return, it turns blue. Keywords are turned blue. In every ID, there are few ways how they show these different colors. You might be noticing when you write the code, few things are blue or green or orange or something like that, and it is here in the setting. You can change whatever you want to see in which format. But by default, if we keep the default setting, then too we get to know if I have typed correctly, return is turning blue. True is turning blue. These are the keywords. Def is turning blue. These are the keywords, so it is turning blue, right? And that time when I did the typo error, for example, I did like this, it is not turning blue. So we get an idea. We can quickly identify where we are doing wrong. So yes, it is true. It's an even number, but suppose I check it for 13, it is false. So you can always, whenever you write a function or whenever you are doing coding, I would say just do unit testing with 3-4 examples at least, so that you can see if your function is working fine or not. So this is the function for even number. Now if I want to use a lambda function for that, how can I use that is, let me comment this, and I need to use a lambda function. So I am giving the same name to this object even num, and here I am defining a lambda function with the keyword lambda, and I need to say there is one input. Now this input is I'm writing A, you can write X, Y, Z, T, I, J, whatever, because whatever input parameter it is taking, it has to check whether it is divisible by 2 or not. What this function is returning? This function is returning true when A%2 equal to 0. So you might be thinking that you need to write here true if this condition is satisfied, A%2 equal 0, else false. And if you call this function, it works as expected. But we don't need to write this much code. We can even shorten the code. How we can do that is, let me comment this line again. I am writing it another line. So this lambda x, so this is a function which takes one input and which checks this condition. Now you know these operators, you might have practiced operators in Python. So whenever you check these operators, by default this will give you the output true or false. If you are not sure, let me tell you here in the scratch cell. For example, if you check any number 5%2 equal 0. So the output is by default going to be true or false. It is false. If you check it for 6, it is going to be true, right? So you don't need to even write true or false. You can even shorten your code, because when you do this kind of calculation, it has to return true or false. This is the default behavior because it is using the equal to operator. So it has to return true or false. So instead of writing this much code, we can simply remove this part where we are writing true or false. I don't need to write true. I don't need to write else false, right? I just can write like this. And let's see if it works. Oh, I don't need to write if also, because that is the usual thing it will take. So if, oh yeah, and it should be X, my bad. So it is returning true, and let me check it again for another number. It is returning false. It is working fine. I hope you got an idea. What we have done is, this was the function even num. When we wanted to write a lambda function for the same, we have used this statement. This is fine. You can use this statement as well. But the point is, when you check this condition, A%2 equal to 0, this is using an equal to operator, and that operator by default returns true or false, boolean true or false, right? So we don't need to use these keywords else false, we don't need to use if then true, right? So we are even reducing our code and we are just making it shorter. So this is working fine too. So when you start writing the code, after practicing few more examples, you will yourself get to know how you can write efficient code. Otherwise you can work with this example as well, but you should learn different ways to reduce your code or we will talk about time complexity also, maybe sometime else. I have started a series of talking about time complexity on my blog. If you want, you can read that also. So this is a very similar example, and we can see another example here where we want to swap two numbers. For example, I want to do a divided by b. So I want to do it, but I want a to be always greater than b. I just need the division when the numerator is greater than denominator, right? Let me just write it like this: def diff. It takes two argument a, b, and it returns a by b. Now when I call this function div 20 by 10, I am getting 2. That is fine. But suppose by mistake I have given the inputs in the wrong order. I have written 10 by 20, I am getting 0.5, and I don't want to see these decimal points. I just want integer result, right? Because I want the numerator to be always greater than denominator. So I want inside this function, I want some condition which swaps a and b if I have supplied the wrong order of arguments. So how we can do that is, I need to use some condition here. So I need to check if a is greater than b or not. So if a is greater than b, what to do? If a is not greater than b, what to do? So if a is greater than b, we are okay with returning this. It should be, yeah. We need to take care of the indentation every time we are writing these kind of code. And else, if a is less than b, means suppose by mistake I have given the numerator which is less than the denominator, as in this example, then I want to first swap a and b, and then I want to do division. So I can simply say return b by a. So it will swap and then it will do division, right? So now if I have changed this function and I call this thing, when I am supplying 10 comma 20, still it will give me the result 2. So I hope this example is making sense to you. As of now we are not using lambda function. This is a simple function in which we have used one if else condition to swap the numbers, right? And we can convert it to lambda function. So if you want to write a lambda function for this, how we can write? Let me just comment this and I can write a lambda function here. Lambda, I need to use two inputs a, b. Now I need to say return a divided by b. So I don't need to write the return statement explicitly. I can say a divided by b. But when I should return this? If the condition is satisfied. Which condition? A is greater than b. So I can write it like this. But if the condition is not satisfied, what to do? In that case, we need to define b by a, else b by a. Let's see if it works. Yes, it is working. And you can try it with different arguments and see whether you are getting the results as you were expecting. So it is working for both the cases, right? So this is the way to shorten your code. I hope it is useful. Let me just quickly summarize what we have done so far. So we have talked about lambda function, and lambda functions are anonymous functions, or we can say functions with no name. We don't need to explicitly define the name of those functions. When we use these functions, we usually use these functions inside higher level functions or classes, or when we want to use this function temporarily inside some other code chunk, right? Then it becomes handy to use lambda functions. And how we create these lambda functions? We use the keyword lambda. So this is the keyword we use. Here we need to define the arguments which we are having. So we can have a, b, c, whatever arguments we have separated by comma. Then we must have colon. So this is same always in Python. And here we need to write a single expression what we want to return. So this is how lambda function works. Definitely if we have if else condition or something else, we can use those conditions here as well. And we can also combine lambda functions with map, reduce, filter functions to make it even more powerful. We will talk about those in the next tutorial. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.